So when I'm not obsessing over Lost, I like to do other things, like obsess over other shows. And I found this one show, this one really special show. A solid ensemble, an interesting world full of mysteries, great character development, and beautiful backdrops. And this show developed a following, a giant following. People started getting invested and people started really digging deep into the lore of this thing. And the show returned the favor. It gave us moment after moment of unforgettable scenes of love, pain, intrigue, and compassion. So this show is being talked about like it's one of the greatest achievements we have in terms of artistic impact, and people are already packing up their bags on how it will be the new bar set for artistic endeavors into the television medium. So this show is basically doing a victory lap now, but as this show starts moving into its endgame, people start talking. But it's not the good talking like before. People start sounding really nervous that they might not know how to end this thing, and that they might not know how to wrap everything up for us. And as they went on and on, these voices got louder and louder as these diehard loyalists tried to stem the tide that eventually overtook them. And I remember watching the ending and having the most overpowering feeling of deja vu that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And it was only after a couple of days of reflection did it hit me. A sudden realization like a bolt of fucking lightning. Oh my god. Fuck. Oh my god, they fucking did it again. They did the same goddamn thing Lost did. And I mean that in its entirety. There are some discrepancies cosmetically in terms of timeline, but when everything is said and done, Game of Thrones did exactly what Lost did. And I don't mean this in a glib way, saying that Lost ended badly and Game of Thrones ended badly too. I'm saying if you were angry about the ending of Game of Thrones, you were probably angry about it on the same fundamental level for the exact same reasons you were angry about Lost. Game of Thrones wasn't like Lost because it ended badly. Game of Thrones was like Lost because it was like Lost. You're a fucking liar. Spoilers for this, and this. Looking at Game of Thrones and Lost, it's important to understand the principal ingredient that allowed these stories to thrive, and that they are both structured around an ever-evolving ensemble, defined by its vast network of world building. An essential element when dealing with this type of storytelling is inflation. Inflation is crucial to this structure working. Okay, so what do I mean by inflation? Imagine the world of your story is an empty balloon. The empty balloon for Lost is our survivors stuck on an island. The empty balloon for Game of Thrones is a set of noble dynasties vying for the position of the Iron Throne. The empty balloon is the conceit of the show, the first thing you sign up for. As the storytellers move through these episodes of the show, they are blowing into the balloon to expand our characters, plots, environments, and mysteries. All of these elements were already in the show, we just didn't know they were in play. Desmond was always on the island, we just didn't know about him. The Boltons were always plotting, we just didn't see them. So all these elements of the show now start to fill up with their own elements of intrigue and mystery, allowing us even more pathways into exploring these ensembles and environments. Some will talk about expansion in these terms, and I can't stress this enough. These are two very different concepts. Inflation feeds into the elements that are already there. Expansion adds new ones. Nothing wrong with expansion, just not for these shows. In terms of these two shows, expansion nearly tanked both of them. In Lost, we can look at the group that I call the Dharma Initiative corporate branch, and in Game of Thrones, we can look at Dorne. Lost introduced a Dharma organization outside of the one we knew, very removed from the direct territory of the show and middled with minor lasting effect on the trajectory of the story as a whole. Game of Thrones introduced Dorne, who seemed very removed from the direct territory of the show and middled with minor lasting effects on the trajectory of the story as a whole. If either were integrated better, I think they could have proved to have valid elements of inflation, but since neither were, they both essentially were cut following their introductions. I mean, at least Lost was smart enough to do this after the episode. We had an entire arc with Dorne's holiday orgy in Westeros. Will you do something? Oh god, well, you see, now I feel bad. But for the most part, these shows did amazing work in terms of inflation. That is until the endgame. Now, the endgame started differently for these two shows. I'm going to argue the endgame of Lost started with its final season, Season 6. Game of Thrones endgame started Season 7, with Season 8 still yet to come. Is there any coincidence that was when the showrunners ran out of George R.R. Martin's material? I'll let you decide. But yeah, that's entirely why. It marks the endgame of both these shows because they stopped inflation entirely and squeezed out all the air of their show to focus on what they assumed the story was about. In both cases, this assumption was incorrect. In both cases, they changed entire character arcs to accomplish this. With a good endgame in this form of storytelling, you continue inflation, but you also start laying the groundwork for how this whole thing is going to wrap up. Inflation is there, but not as overt, to make way for a smooth transition to the finale. Is there any example of a show doing this? Yep, The Wire. Season 5 of The Wire introduced the newsroom as the inflation cast while focusing mostly on building each episode's towards satisfying conclusion of our core ensemble. Another? How about Breaking Bad? The final season solidified both Madrigal and the meth Nazis as main antagonists while building the White family and friends towards a cautionary tragic ending. It's possible to do this, it just takes time and planning. Like the reason you fucking take a year off. Game of Thrones Endgame decided that this ensemble show had a main character, and told us who it was. The main character was Jon Snow. Lost Endgame told us this ensemble show had a main character, and told us who the main character was. It was Jack Shephard. They both also had an amazing character that the showrunners would hope that you hated more, but since you didn't, they had to rewrite the character entirely. John Locke was an incredible man. He was driven, determined, and passionate. He had to overcome so many obstacles to become the man he wanted to be. The end of season 1 is really about him coming into his own as a leader and as himself. He is an amazing leader. If not a bit misguided sometimes, but we love him. A couple of seasons in, they're not sure what to do with him, so they just have him pal around with the others, learning to be a leader. By the end game, the writers realized that we love this character even though they thought his dogmatic beliefs and what he believed and his unwavering focus on justice and what was right would make us hate him. But it didn't. So they turned him into a completely different character who didn't act at all like the character we knew and had this newly determined main character of Jack kill him in the most anticlimactic way possible. On the other hand, you have Dany, who was an incredible woman. She was driven and determined and passionate. She had to overcome so many obstacles to become the woman who she wanted to be. The end of season 1 is really about her coming into her own as a leader and as herself. She's an amazing leader, if not a bit misguided sometimes, but we love her. A couple of seasons in, they're not sure what to do with her, so they just have her hang around Meereen learning to be a leader. By the endgame, the writers realized that we love this character even though they thought her dogmatic beliefs in what she believed and her unwavering focus on justice for what was right would make us hate her. But we didn't. So they turned her into a completely different character who didn't act at all like the character we knew, and they had this newly determined main character of Jon kill her in the most anticlimactic way possible. Sam stands in for Hurley as the overweight comic relief character who is befriended by our main character and is ultimately tasked with keeping the story of the show alive after it's done. Tyrion stands in for Ben, one of the most interesting, awesome, and crafty characters of the first half of the series. And then they just really didn't know what to do with him, so he sort of hangs out the second half. And they give him this happy ending that doesn't make any sense for his character. It's like they both said, we know you love this guy, sorry we forgot about him, but look, he's happy now. And in both cases, you're kind of like, he doesn't seem that happy. I mean, I know you think he is, but I think the actor knows, and we know his character really well, and he didn't get any kind of payoff, you jokers. The White Walkers on Game of Thrones kind of took the place of the smoke monster on Lost. Both had mysterious motives that developed towards a kind of non-conclusion. In the end, it seemed like both had a rich history of lore that was never really explored besides, it's bad if they win? Since neither won, I guess we'll never figure out what that meant. Like, both didn't really matter because the real story was actually about this main character arc. The final crisis of the show has a simple fixed ending that the main character just kind of guessed would work. I mean, Jack just kind of guesses unplugging the cork will allow him to kill Locke. And Jon guesses if they kill the Night King, the rest will die. I mean, at no point are they presented any information that can confirm this. It's just like a hunch. And weirdly, both of them are right. I mean, that is very lucky. They both also told us who was going to rule over their stupid fucking land, which no one gave a fuck about. Bran is the king of Westeros and Hurley is the protector of the island. And in both cases you kind of went, huh, I mean, that's a weird choice. I mean, I also didn't fucking care because that's not really what the world is about, but for some reason it doesn't make any sense anyway. Again, both shows thought this was what we were going to be complaining about if we didn't get it, but nobody really cared about that outcome. The weirdest one is both shows' final conflict wrap up in the most ridiculously bizarre same way. Both of the main characters, Jon and Jack, work towards the plan of the antagonist characters, Dany and Locke, and achieve this goal only to directly after achieving this goal, unplugging the cork, taking the Iron Throne, have the main character, Jon and Jack, turn around and stab the antagonist, Dany Locke, with a knife. Why is that so convoluted, and why did both do the exact same thing? So the endgame of both shows are just that, backtracking and destroying all inflation in hopes of cobbling together a shoddy conclusion based around negating plots, and characters arriving at a single man's journey conclusion, which is fucking tone-deaf and incorrect. And here's the weirdest thing about both shows, that they actually nail that conclusion. Both of our main characters in terms of single tone and arc. I mean, I think I honestly didn't like either Jack or Jon's character until their final scenes, which happened to be the final scenes of the series. Jack meeting his death with someone by his side, knowing he completed what he set out to do, and Jon joining the Wildlings to live the life of a ranger, which he always wanted. Both shows end with our main character petting a dog. or dire wolf. Whatever. You get what the fuck I'm trying to say here. I mean, both accomplish the feels so well in those scenes. It's actually entirely astounding how well both of those scenes are. And I want to be clear, I never make these for clickbait. Believe me, no one watches these fucking videos besides you guys. And I'm not trying to add to this I hate everything mentality. I'm sure the reason you're watching this is the same reason I made it. You really like these shows. You spent a lot of time invested in them. They took up a number of years of your life and you didn't like the ending, and it was hard to put into words exactly what you didn't like about it. And I hope this video helped in that regard. My way of saying, yeah, I hear ya. That did suck, didn't it? And they did it before, and they're probably gonna do it again. But there's hope, you know? I hope we're learning something. I hope it's at least getting better. And until it does, I'm gonna keep making videos. But I think Imposters is going to end pretty well. You know, Imposters, I think it's going to be fucking great. Just saying that now, Imposters, 5 more seasons. I'm ready to get my heart broken again.
Are you ready for the